Hello again, this is section 12 of Karen Armstrong's chapter on the Buddha's Enlightenment, her book The Buddha. This is A-level Buddhism anthology work. A nice little short passage here, let's read it. Once he has banished malevolence and hatred from his mind, he lives without ill will, and is also full of compassion, desiring the welfare of all beings. Once he has banished the mental habits of laziness and indolence, he is not only free of laziness and indolence, but has a mind that is lucid, conscious of itself, and completely alert. Once he has banished anxiety and worry, he lives without anxiety, and his mind becomes calm and still. Once he has banished uncertainty, he lives with a mind that has outgrown debilitating doubt, and is no longer plagued by unprofitable, akuzla mental states. So, hopefully a short video here. Things that we need to ask. Why, for Armstrong, is there never any reference to the context? There's no reference to contrasting Mahayana ideas of the Buddha, or Shakyamuni as they refer to him, and in particular Buddha nature, their much enlarged conception of the Buddha and the Trikaya doctrine. This is a very flattened, compressed form of Buddhism, this generic Buddhism that she's inventing. Mahayana have the idea that the Buddha needed no enlightenment. Why is she not referred to that? As we read through this little section, we find Armstrong talks once again, properly so, about kusala, or skillful states of mind, which are, she doesn't then refer to, considered foundational in early and then later Theravada development of mindfulness, hatred, malevolence being some of the poisons that needed to be overcome. But there's no discussion of how these ideas developed from perhaps early in the Buddhist thinking to later, from the first sermon to the third sermon, from mere ignorance, or sorry, from mere desire to greed, ignorance, and hatred. This is lazy. It feels lazy. He banished malevolence and hatred from his mind, and he lives without ill will, and is also full of... Now here we have an opposite, compassion. What are the opposites that are wholesome, skillful states of mind that are to be developed? And why should they be developed? Again, there's no context. Desiring the welfare of all living beings. Whoa! There's two different philosophies of Buddhism. We have Mahayana and we have Theravada going on in the one sentence, and it's just doing a mashup that is, well, it's lacking in scholarly depth. Armstrong is being vague. She's appropriating first Theravada with no context, and then the Mahayana vow to help all living beings, compassion. Now, what is compassion? Well, it's there both in Theravada and Mahayana, it's true. Non-hatred, adavesa, is the opposite. Or perhaps a better, more positive term is loving kindness, metta. And metta is a very important term for Theravada. It's the first of the four sublime states. And it's a term that predates Buddhism, and perhaps the Buddha adapted from Brahmanism, along with four other great virtues that we could develop. So metta, compassion, perhaps is a very, very important idea. But what does it actually mean? Well, scattered throughout the Pali Canon, you find compassion mentioned a lot. There are 10 perfections, and compassion is one of the perfections. It's the first, in fact, of the Brahma Viharas, the great virtues. And in the Pali Canon, the Buddha of Vamsa lists 10 of these perfections. Now, metta becomes number 9 in that list, where it's number 1 in the great Brahma Viharas. Loving kindness, as we go through these, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity. The 4 Brahma Viharas are put alongside these developed list of perfections. Perhaps this is a later development that begins with generosity. Well, that's great if you want you want to be a monk and you want people to support you and to be generous in the way they support you, giving you stuff you need. And you want people to be virtuous, more, so you have a nice organized, properly run society that supports the monastery. Nekama, renunciation. You don't hear a lot of Mahayana talking about nekama as a perfection. It's there in the Pali Canon. It's kind of ignored by Theravada, and it's not in Abhidhamma. It's in the Sutta Pitaka. Problem for Mahayana. Pana, or wisdom, prajna in other words, wisdom, insight, there. Virya, or energy, or diligence, vigor, that's there in this list of 10. And the list goes on. And you keep asking, why is Armstrong not mentioning this list of 10 perfections, or indeed their development, or indicate the controversies over what are the perfections between Theravada and Mahayana, between their early Pali Canon status and list and the later developed list of 6 or 10 perfections in the Lotus Sutra. And the list continues. Patience, well, that's a good virtue. It's not there in the Mahayana lists. Truthfulness, that's not there in the Mahayana lists. Think upaya. Truthfulness kind of contrasts to upaya as a perfection. Determination. Metta comes up again. Metta, loving kindness, and then most of all, upekkha, equanimity, serenity, as the highest of the virtues. Well, that's not the highest of the virtues for Mahayana. Theirs is this kind of transcendent knowledge or wisdom of the perfected wisdom of Mahayana. Armstrong glosses over these debates and discussions and creates her own construct, and she's selectively taking out all of the controversy from the Buddha and his teachings. As we look through this passage that she's quoting, or is she, there's a lot of these repeated phrases. Once he, look at these once he's, once he, once he, once he. Repeated phrases sound like, at least, the formulaic discourses of the Pali Canon, which go back to the oral tradition, how it was remembered and passed down. And a good way to revise, to learn stuff, is to have a memory peg, something you can hang it on and remember stuff from. And you find stuff like this scattered across the Pali Canon, but it's not clear that she's quoting any particular bit here, or if she is, I can't find it. Maybe she is. It sounds more like a paraphrase of the Pali Canon than a proper quote. So why are these repeated phrases there, and why does Armstrong, in fact, not point them out in her simplistic account of the life of the Buddha? It's a really important question, and it seems that her flat Buddha, her uncontroversial, uncontestable, everyday, everyman Buddha, is not to be marred in the waters of mud of controversy between Theravada and Mahayana. Just to finish off with this one little phrase here, akuzla, mental states. The skillful states and the contrasting unskillful or akuzla states. Once he had banished uncertainty, and that's unskillful. He lives with a mind that has outgrown debilitating doubt, uncertainty, debilitating doubt, and is no longer plagued by unprofitable akuzla mental state. Now, this is fair. Ignorance is the key poison, perhaps the earliest poison in the mind of the Buddha. And in Buddhism, it's the first of the 12 links of dependent origination is ignorance. So this would be linked to uncertainty, debilitating doubt as a unprofitable mental state. Ignorance stops true knowledge, the arising of true knowledge. Darkness and light. Darkness is a symbol of ignorance, light of life. And the true Buddha is someone who's awoken to this and abides in this state of true knowledge of their state and condition in a diligent and ardent and resolute way, according to the texts. Karen Armstrong, you can do better.